Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're going to demystify one of history's most legendary figures, Thomas Edison. Now, we typically picture inventors as these solitary geniuses, just sitting around waiting for a sudden lightning bolt of inspiration to strike, right? Well, we're going to explore how Edison actually took invention and totally transformed it from a random flash of genius into a highly disciplined, industrialized process. You know that famous saying, 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration? Well, for Edison, that wasn't just some catchy bumper sticker. It was his entire core ethos. He actually grew to resent titles that painted him as a magical genius. He really wanted the world to know that his empire was built on relentless, grueling work and massive amounts of trial and error, not just sudden, magical aha moments. To see how he pulled this off, we're going to follow a clear roadmap. First, the self-taught telegrapher. Second, the invention factory. Third, lighting up the world. Fourth, war of the currents. And finally, resilience and reinvention. All right, starting off with Section 1, the self-taught telegrapher. It's fascinating how a mostly deaf, self-taught kid turned a genuinely tough childhood into an absolute powerhouse foundation for engineering. Born in 1847, Edison suffered from severe ear infections that left him almost completely deaf. But as an adult, he actually claimed this hearing loss helped him tune out distractions. Talk about a silver lining. He started hustling incredibly early, selling papers on trains at age 13, which actually led him to learn telegraphy. He tinkered endlessly, eventually moving to New York City, and his first major financial breakthrough hit in 1874. He earned an astounding $30,000 for inventing the quadruplex telegraph, a device that could send 4 messages simultaneously over a single wire. That was absolute life-changing money back then. And that capital changed everything, bringing us right to Section 2, the invention factory. What is so cool here is that Edison didn't just invent new products. He literally invented the process of inventing itself. With his new wealth, he built Menlo Park in New Jersey, establishing the Industrial Research Laboratory. This was a facility entirely dedicated to creating knowledge and, crucially, controlling its commercial application. Before Edison, this concept barely even existed. By bringing chemists, engineers, machinists, and researchers all under one roof, he scaled up innovation. He essentially created the exact blueprint for the massive corporate R&D labs we see at tech giants today. And this perfectly illustrates his maximalist approach to innovation. Menlo Park was stocked with almost every conceivable material you could imagine for testing. But, the human cost was intense. Edison demanded 18-hour workdays, Monday through Friday, plus weekends. One of his employees actually described it as working to the limits of human exhaustion. But the output? Completely staggering. They averaged a new U.S. patent every 10 to 12 days, and the facility quickly expanded to cover 2 full city blocks. The guy was manufacturing patents exactly like a factory manufactures goods. This relentless system yielded some truly incredible results. In 1877, they dropped the phonograph. Now, to the public back then, the ability to record and play back a human voice, that seemed almost supernatural. It catapulted Edison into god-tier fame. But while the press dubbed him the Wizard of Menlo Park, that whole persona was heavily curated through his own very deliberate PR efforts. He constantly worked the journalists to control his narrative, cleverly masking the massive team effort and the grueling labor that actually powered his magic. So let's look at his biggest challenge yet in Section 3, lighting up the world. It is absolutely vital to understand this next point. Edison did not just invent a light bulb. A bulb on its own is basically useless. He had to invent a massive, interconnected system to make the bulb viable. First, his team had to test countless materials just to find a carbonized bamboo filament that could last over 1,200 hours. Second, they had to create a reliable vacuum inside the glass so that the filament wouldn't just instantly burn up. But step 3 is the real kicker. He had to design an entire 110-volt direct current power grid to actually deliver the electricity to people's homes. It required massive parallel innovations in dynamos, glass blowing, and power distribution all at once. To prove to the world that this sprawling system could scale commercially, he built the Pearl Street Station in Manhattan in 1882. We're talking about a massive 600-kilowatt steam-powered station providing 110 volts of direct current. He successfully served 508 initial customers and powered over 10,000 individual lamps. He wasn't just selling a novelty item anymore, he was effectively laying down the DNA for the modern electrical utility industry. His goal was to entirely replace gas and oil lighting, and he was doing it. But dominance breeds serious competition, bringing us to Section 4, War of the Currents. This was one of the most bitter corporate rivalries in history, and the technological stakes were crystal clear. Edison had built his entire empire on direct current, or DC. But DC had a fatal flaw. It couldn't be transmitted much farther than a single mile, which meant it was only really viable for dense city centers. Enter George Westinghouse with alternating current, or AC. Because AC used transformers to step up voltages, the electricity could travel over long distances on much thinner, cheaper wires. It was undeniably superior for wide-scale adoption, but Edison, he was completely, fiercely stubborn about keeping his DC standard. So what do you do to protect your massive investments when the rival tech is better? You go on the offensive. Edison resorted to brutal PR tactics, launching a full-scale smear campaign to convince the public that high-voltage AC was wildly dangerous. He even joined forces with anti-AC crusaders to aid in the public electrocution of animals using alternating current. Seriously, even though he personally opposed capital punishment, he actively supported the development of the AC-powered electric chair, entirely to brand his rival's technology as a deadly threat. But despite all those ruthless tactics, technology ultimately won out. Westinghouse installed his first systems in 1886. By 1888, Edison's propaganda was peaking, but he was already losing serious market share because AC was just simply more efficient. The constant bleeding of cash from competition and endless patent wars led financier J.P. Morgan to step in. In 1892, Morgan engineered a Wall Street merger combining Edison's company with an AC rival to create General Electric. Edison lost control and was essentially marginalized from the very lighting industry he helped create. Wild, right? So what does a restless inventor do when he gets ousted from his own company? We enter our final chapter, Section 5, Resilience and Reinvention. You pivot hard. Edison took his fortune and poured it into solving an iron ore shortage on the East Coast. He built a massive, highly automated mining operation featuring gigantic 70-ton electrically powered rollers just to crush boulders. Now, the mine ultimately bled money and failed, but he didn't stop there. He brilliantly took that rock-crushing technology and reused it to launch the Edison Portland Cement Company. He even attempted this incredibly visionary, though ultimately unsuccessful project to cast entire 3-story concrete houses in a single mold to solve affordable housing. The guy simply could not stop building systems. And then, talk about a gut punch. In 1914, a massive fire ripped right through his huge West Orange factory complex. That staggering $1.5 million? That represents the total damages from the inferno. Now, he was in his late 60s at this point. Most people would have just collected the insurance and walked away. But this perfectly captures his absolute grit. Standing in the literal ashes of his life's work, he didn't see a reason to retire. He saw an opportunity for a clean slate. He optimistically ordered everything to be rebuilt using the absolute newest technology, and incredibly, his team resumed manufacturing operations within just a few weeks. As we start to wrap up this explainer, the contrast between the public myth of Edison and his gritty reality is just fascinating. The whole lone genius idea? Actually, he was the pioneer of collaborative R&D labs. The sudden inspiration? That was heavily fueled by grueling 18-hour workdays. And the benevolent Wizard of Menlo Park was a businessman entirely capable of utilizing cutthroat, brutal PR tactics to protect his empire. But you absolutely cannot argue with the results. 1,093. That is the total number of U.S. patents he registered in his lifetime. It stands as a monument to an uncompromising dedication to applied science and a relentless drive to actually bring complex ideas all the way to the commercial market. So I'll leave you with this. Is Thomas Edison's true legacy just the light bulb, the phonograph, or the movie camera? Or is it the very concept of relentless, industrialized innovation, the modern R&D lab that literally powers our world today? That's definitely something to chew on. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the history behind the innovations we take for granted every single day.